We're going to practice factoring quadratics. So I know this is a quadratic because this is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we need to recognize that this is standard form. So in order to factor a quadratic, it must always be in standard form. So here it is. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is I need to look for the greatest common factor. So do I have a greatest common factor? So I'm looking for the factors between 2, 3, and 5. And the answer is the only factor that they have, these are all prime, so this is the same as 1 times 2, 1 times 3, 1 times 5. And the only factor they have in common is 1. So is there a greatest common factor? The answer is no. So that means then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up my plan to factor by grouping. So I'm going to keep my work off to the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my 2y squared times my negative 5. So that gives me negative 10y squared. Then whatever I have here in the middle, I put down here in the bottom. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 10y squared that also add to negative 3y, because I want to replace this negative 3y. So I know that my factors of y squared is y times y, so that means I'm going to have a y here and a y here. Now I need to find my factors of negative 10. So my factors of negative 10, I'm going to have 1 times negative 10, 2 times negative 5, and nothing else works. I'll end up repeating 5, so I could have 5 and a negative 2, or 10 and negative 1. So these repeat. Just notice that the signs are flipped. So which one of these sets is going to give me a negative 3? Well, if I look right here, 2 plus negative 5 gives me negative 3. So this is going to be 2, and this is going to be negative 5. So remember what I said, I'm replacing this negative 3y. So I'm going to copy down 2y squared, and then I have plus, because this is positive, 2y, and minus 5y, and then I'm going to bring down this negative 5. So everything in yellow, with the yellow highlighter, is the same. So that's going to help you see why we're using this. Notice I ignored, once I found this in the yellow, I ignored the top and the bottom. So now that I have my quadratic written in 4 terms, I'm going to group. That's why this is called factoring by grouping. So now I'm going to look in the first part, what's a common factor? Well, I can factor out 2y and 2y. So factoring out is undistributing. So I'm undistributing this 2y. I cannot throw it away. So I'm undistributing, which means it comes outside of parentheses. Now I'm going to do the division. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Y squared divided by y is y. 2y divided by 2y is 1. So now let's look at the other side. Because my first term is negative, I know I have to factor out a negative. They both have factors of 5, so I can factor out a negative 5. So that's what I'm factoring out here. I'm going to highlight that because that's where that came. So this comes down, and that gives me negative 5. So now I have negative 5y divided by negative 5, which gives me a positive y. And negative 5 divided by negative 5 gives me a positive 1. So you can see that the things that are in the parentheses are the same. So that means I can divide out y plus 1 and y plus 1 because both of these are the same factors, the same number. So just like I took these out to the front, I'm going to take these out to the front. So this is y plus 1. And then what am I left with? Well, let's do it like this. So I know that this, y plus 1 divided by y plus 1, that divides out to 1. And that divides out to 1 when I divide. It's the same number divided by itself. So that leaves me with 2y minus 5. So those are my factors.